Right, this is going to be episode 44 of OverSight. Something of a ghetto setup because I'm in the middle kingdom between heaven and earth, as the Chinese call the kingdom of their birth. It's a great song by Rush, if anyone knows that reference. Probably not a lot of people because they're not old like me. Anyway, the episode's begun. We started. So we'll just do that thing where we introduce people. Again, trying to stay on that professionalism tip that we've never actually even begun on. So the guests for this episode, you've seen one of them before. Wolf's been on the past ones. Obviously, guy out of StarCraft 2. Then he was doing Apex in Korea. Now he's over in the Overwatch League. Who knows? Next season.
Skipped the disappointing HOTS middle segment.
Yes.
That one didn't turn out as well now.
we don't talk about that one. You know, that never happened. Actually. In fact, actually, as Blizzard employees, you should know that there never was a HOTS. You know, they just kept straight from StarCraft 2 to Overwatch, and it was a success the whole way. So don't even worry about it. League of Legends was always the best of the MOBAs. Our other guest actually comes from League of Legends, Curryshot. Who did you work with in League of Legends, mate? It was a few different teams, right?
Yeah, I worked with a lot of the more tier 2, Final 5, Fusion, Ember, Imagine. I worked for...
A lot of people who tried to get into the LCS, basically.
I can't wait to hear the Ember stories. Those are the true gems. Those are the true gems.
Exactly.
They're pretty
We'll get into some of that later because, you know, we can have some fun with that. So, and at the moment in Overwatch, he's the coach of the Mayhem Academy team, which is obviously Florida Mayhem's academy, which does actually feature some players people would know. Manaton is alive and well. I know a lot of people were worried about him, you know, from Overwatch League Season 1. Where was he? Turns out he's alive. He's in the Mayhem Academy team, as is Fact Fiction, obviously of Outlaws fame. Anyone else we might know? Anyone else big names?
Yeah, Mangachu being one of them.
There we go. Yes, Mangachu as well. Canada. Okay, so a few. Yeah. And I'll already tease it before now. One of the reasons I also wanted to have Curryshot on this episode is because one of the things I found interesting when Overwatch came out is that it is a game that sort of blends genres together. So even though the most obvious aspect to it is the FPS aspect, because everyone's in first person with guns, etc., as we've discussed in some of the past episodes, and obviously as you've seen in the GOATS meta, there's a lot of kind of similarities between MOBAs and that whole aspect, and you know how you use the ult economy and the order that you do team fight. So I thought at some point we'll get into that aspect. So this is we'll start off obviously with the Overwatch Stage 1 playoffs. So
wait, before we get into that, I do actually have to explain a few things because we haven't actually talked about. So this is legitimately the first time we've done this live, first and foremost. Okay. So that is important to explain. So Twitch chat, I actually can look at you this time. And for those of you who are constantly fucking...
That's the mistake. You shouldn't have told them that. Now they'll all actually try to say things. Yeah, you could have had them all thinking it was the episode.
So for those of you always asking why it's not usually live, the answer is because obviously Thorin lives in the UK. If we're going to do an episode, it would be very late, like 3 a.m. for him at the normal time we air it in the US. And even though he stayed up for 20 hours right now for some reason, which I don't know, so he is very tired and probably less censored than even usual, we're still going to attempt this. So normally, and also because typically when we have players or coaches on, we try to get them before their scrims start. So we usually record it in the morning in California time.
Sure.
But now, because he's in China, we can actually do it live. And that's why it's been a little bit, weird in terms of scheduling and surprising. But I hope you guys enjoy it. So anyway, that's the caveats between all of this stuff that's going to happen right now. So we are actually doing it live, and thanks for you guys for joining us. So now we can continue with Stage 1 playoffs.
Okay. So let's start with this topic then. So obviously the sexiest topic of the playoffs was what will happen if the New York NYXL plays against the Vancouver Titans. The correct answer is no one knows still. Like, maybe we'll find out next time. You know, that's unfortunate, guys.
No, Thorin, we're not going to find out until August when they play in the regular season because they only play that one game between each other.
Or in Stage 2 playoffs potentially. I mean, there's a chance.
There's
don't get your hopes up, Wolf. Like we've learned from that once. So okay, let's start with that then. So let's just work backwards. So the champions, the Vancouver Titans. This was a team where on the one hand, I actually saw there was a decent kind of like groundswelling of people who thought they would win the stage, actually, and that actually they would beat the NYXL if they played them. And so, if anything, I was kind of surprised by how close it was in the final when they weren't playing NYXL. So, Wolf, what did you actually think? Obviously, this is a team that you've seen the core of it when they were over in Korea. Were you kind of bullish that they were going to win the stage?
Well, I mean, once we got 4 or 5 matches into the regular season of stage 1, it's not really regular season, but you know what I mean, the round robin. For the first part of it, I started to feel like, okay, they're going to lose the finals to New York, but they did a lot better than I expected, because most people weren't really pitting them as a top 4 team necessarily, because we were talking about stuff like how well are they going to adjust to LA, how are they going to adjust to the schedule, which is very different from Apex and Contenders. But I didn't think they were going to beat New York, but I felt like the Shock series, I didn't believe that Shock was going to have a close series against them until like we got to the end of the playoffs, and that's when I was wondering, like, is Shock going to win this? What an upset that would be based on the start of the season, and also because Vancouver defeated them previously just a few weeks before. So for me, like, I didn't really think it was going to be one-sided in the finals, but I didn't believe that until very late. Like, if you had asked me in like week 4, week 5, I would have been like, yeah. If you could tell me one thing about the future and you said, okay, New York is not going to the finals, I probably think Vancouver crushes anybody they meet, but it didn't end up working out that way.
Okay. What about you, Curryshot? What are your expectations for this team?
Yeah, I used to follow them pretty closely. When I was, I guess, on the rise, trying to, win our games there. There was a lot to learn from that team, and I think they met expectations. But I think, as far as like NYXL versus Vancouver, I feel like that series would have been really close. But I think New York actually probably would have come on top. And I know that's like a hard thing to say. Obviously, it's a speculation, but
Sure.
I really think Mano is a very experienced main tank. And there's a lot of main tanks in the league who they start cutting trances, they start cutting beats, right, in grav when they don't have anything to really combo with, right? And they learn from him really. So he's still like, it's basically like what Fleta did in stage 1 with Widow, for instance. A lot of people didn't take off angles, and then they started doing the crossfires and stuff like that. So I think in terms of that series, it really would have been a close one too. But yeah.
Okay. So Monty, you were one of the people, right, who wasn't all in on Vancouver initially?
Well, no. I mean, we talked to Wolf as part of our like mega episode before the season started, and I think he articulated well a lot of the concerns that I had when it came to, is this team actually going to be playing well under the conditions? Because they got here late, remember, too. So they arrived later than the rest of the teams. They didn't really have the Overwatch League experience, which can be quite grueling compared to an Apex schedule where you have more time to prepare between matches. Now, obviously, they did have the advantage of having played GOATS for an extremely long period of time and more experienced in the meta, but the changes on Koreans for moving to a different country and trying to acclimate to that with the short timeline, I knew they'd be good. I think I placed them 6th on my power ranking at the start of the season. I didn't know they'd be, this good. So that was, I think, a pleasant surprise to see their excellence in terms of GOATS. And by the end, I don't know if I necessarily agree. Like actually everybody in the Overwatch League talent predicted NYXL to win the stage, which I think was a safe bet considering that we were looking at how conservatively, how their experience, their more defensive play style, I think, was going to be favored. What was weird is that Mono and Meko, their tank line, I think really underperformed when they went up against Seoul, and they seemed like they were nervous for some reason and choking, which was, they played very differently than they did in the regular season games. And then also there was the other factor, which was San Francisco coming into the playoffs, because really, I said this on the show many times, but the thing that was holding San Francisco back was that really that in clutch moments, they were playing New York and Titans very close in maps, and it would be in the final moments in an overtime push where they would collapse and seem to choke out of those matches. And so as soon as I saw them play in the first round of the playoffs, and all of a sudden they started performing exceptionally well in those overtime situations, then I knew that it was going to be a very competitive match in the finals, because I predicted them to win. I was wrong. It went to 7 games. It was obviously extremely close. But you see the difference between the first time they played against Vancouver and the second time they played against Vancouver, where if you can win just even like a couple of those like overtime pushes, you can win the map. And I think that was the big change for San Francisco. I think it was in their head more than anything else.
Yeah, and it's crazy they were able to do it through like pretty arguably like I felt that same feeling as well, and it was against two arguably really weak opponents in the Defiant and then Fusion. In terms of like all the teams that made top 8, like those were some of the easier ones. You know, they didn't have to hit New York on the way or anything like that. And yet I also had that same feeling of like this is a cleaner team, and when a team becomes really terrifying. I feel like when mentally you start to feel like, okay, we're going to win this stage. And I felt like I was seeing that in their play. Like they were like, okay, we could do this. Like, look at our path. We're going to go to the finals, and we can beat Vancouver. This is definitely doable. They remember their last series was closer than it looked. So that's like a really terrifying team to play against, especially for Vancouver in that moment, who's been undefeated on top of the world. They have a crazy win streak that goes back to like July or early August. I can't even remember if you look back at their Contenders history. So last time they lost a series was so long ago that when you start to lose a series like that in the finals, like I had kind of given up on Vancouver when we were getting to like maps 3 and 4. I was like, I think Shock's going to take this away from them. I don't think they're going to win it because it's such a huge momentum shift, right? And a lot of people said, Bumper wasn't trying and he turned it on in the end. I don't think that's what happened. I think what happened in the later parts of that series was Runaway, before they were the Titans, have been in several finals that went to more than 7 games because of tiebreakers. So like some 9-map series back in the Apex days, back in Contenders Korea. They've been in this situation in the final game so many times that they were just so clutch. Rialto was insane. Like when you look at how incredible the time bank of Shock was, almost no team actually recovers from that. Almost no team. And then we see like a record-breaking push from Vancouver. Like that's the experience that you have in a Game 7 finals, that like you have so much experience at this moment, you're just not phased there. And I thought they were going to crumble because they'd never really lost in such a long time. They were on this incredible streak. But that showed so much mental fortitude and so much experience.
Yeah, and like I'd like to add too, like for me when I saw that specifically, what you're talking about on Rialto, it was like very reminiscent of, I'm gonna make a comparison to League of SKT, right?
Yep.
Which was a team that could be so far behind and they could just be there mentally and just come back, and like even harder and actually take a game back. And in League, for those of you who are not like very familiar with it, it's very hard to do that. So when I saw that, it was like really surprising to me, and that's how you can really tell like they're a very experienced team and they've been together. And like it also shows like what an owl team can be if they pick a team straight away too, like a team like Runaway.
I do think that, not to say that Titans are going to be, when I say they're going to be worse in the next stage, I don't mean that they're going to be a bad team. I just mean that we're going to be in a new meta that they are less accustomed to on the whole. And it's hard to be better than the Titans were in the last stage with their level of experience with Rhine Goats. So do we expect, I think we can all agree that the Titans are probably going to be a less good team, but they're still going to probably be an elite team. Like it would be shocking if they fell out of the top 4 at this point.
There's also historical precedence for this squad. When you look at what happened in Apex Season 3, where they fell off super hard, they're experimenting a lot, the meta changed significantly. That's when we saw a lot of the rise of support Sombra. Then in Season 4, they bounced back, they made the finals, they didn't win it. But then you go to Contenders Season 1, they lose early in that as well to X6, struggle with that meta as well. Then you go to Contenders Season 2, it's like every other season of Korean Overwatch, they were on point in a meta they were comfortable with. Meta shifts, they struggle, then they get comfortable, the meta doesn't shift, they do well. And this is another case of that where they won the championship, the meta didn't change between Contenders Season 2 and even Contenders Season 3 they didn't play in. And then Overwatch League, it's been this 3-3 GOATS meta for so long, they don't have to shift. But if there's a massive shift going to the next stage, in Stage 2, I agree with you, there's such a historical precedence for this team struggling to adapt as well, beyond just that they're so focused on this meta and they haven't experimented, they haven't been playing DPSs at all, outside of like Bumper's Hanzo, which we all know wasn't very serious.
And Summonsu's McCree on Ilios.
Well, that was weird. I don't know why they're not playing Stitch on that.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And that's what we have to consider too, is Stitch, right? Like we haven't seen him at all, and like I think in that meta, we will see Stitch.
And Hureg, the god,
true.
multi-stage winner, Hureg. I mean,
Not the name you would have picked to be the first one.
I think Stitches, yeah.
One stage, no, Hureg won stage 1. He won this stage. Hureg he's basically just the mascot of teams to win stages in the Overwatch League at this point in time. Didn't he win Contenders as well after he was dropped from London?
He did.
Yeah.
He won Contenders season. He won the season that Runaway won when he was on the bench.
God.
He did see a lot of play leading up to the finals, but in the finals, not so much.
I just love that he's like the good luck charm of teams as they create, championship winning runs. He's just there smiling and waving idly from the bench. Pretty good shit.
I do agree with you, Monty, though, like in terms of they're still going to be an elite team because they went to China, remember, for the NetEase tournament back in the day and in the winter one. And, they had to play in a Chinese meta and adapt quickly, and they didn't have that time to prepare. And they actually did really well. I mean, they won the tournament, so.
True.
Yeah.
They also, in Contender Season 1 for Korea, ended up with a pretty nice finish in top 4 and narrowly lost to X6. I mean, that's not like a disappointing performance. Usually Apex Season 3, that was a completely different story, obviously, where they did very poorly, didn't get out of groups. So there's a the gap is definitely closing in terms of how they fail to adapt. Like they've done better recently when they had to adapt. So
yeah, definitely.
I mean, I think they're still going to look good. I mean, there's no way they're going to be below top 8, I'd say, in stage 2.
I mean, obviously it'd be shocking if they fell out of the top 5. But are they going to be the same undefeated team? I think like the margin for error is much higher right now, and we'll see how well teams can adapt, because typically, we've got a lot of teams that adapt well. We also have some elite teams that are coming into the new meta that are probably going to be much better, like the Philadelphia Fusion. And like let's skip ahead, because I think a lot of people are wondering kind of what they're going to be seeing in the new meta. So I think we should talk about that a little bit, because is there still going to be a lot of GOATs? Yes. Is it mostly Winston GOATs now? Yes. Is there a lot of Baptiste now? Yes. So why don't we talk about what we expect to see? There will be less GOATs overall, and it will be different. So let's like, since we are 3 analysts coming here, we can, I think, have a very good conversation about what we expect.
Yeah, I mean, we saw, what was it, Unco tweeted about, like, by the way, it's still GOATs, haha. It's obviously going to be GOATs, especially on certain maps. Some maps are just really good for GOATs, like Rialto, for example, in the past, especially in Korea where all maps were open. If you ever saw Rialto picked, it was like always going to be some variation of GOATs because of how the tight corridors work. And historically, we always saw King's Row, even before GOATs, like when we had Reinhardt Zarya, it was a great map for that. Dorado, first point, really good for that. So there's always going to be moments where you want to run the 3-3. I don't think it's going to be as permanent. My feeling was always that we were going to see Brigitte replaced by Baptiste, because if you're not running up against anyone who's trying to get behind you, like a Tracer or a Genji or a Sombra, which we will see some Sombra still, I think, you don't need the Brigitte as much. She's been nerfed so much. Baaptiste's healing field is consistently usable. You don't have to hit people in order to use it, and he can poke.
Right-click.
Yes, and he can heal more consistently than Brigitte. He has more damage output and more range than Brigitte. So there's just a lot more utility for him overall. He doesn't have rally, but he has immortality that can grant to people a more specific, clutch moment, right? So not to mention that most Brigitte players overall, not all, but most Brigitte players have a hit scan or DPS background, and that's going to fit really well with how Baptiste's weapon works. So I'm kind of leaning towards, if you're going to replace one hero in a comp that's similar to GOATs, then Brig's going to be swapped out for Baptiste, and we will see swaps based on if someone's trying to run dive or someone's trying to run Sombra, because you're going to need that stun unless you're running something like McCree, which is unrealistic.
So, Curry, have you been working with your team in the new meta?
Yeah, here and there. Yeah.
Keeping secrets.
I think what we're going to see more so in 2CP, I think the Baptiste comps will be more seen. And I think it makes more sense there. But I do agree, like, GOATs will be, for the most part, still there. But you also have to think about, like, how much time there is to prepare for this. And, like, it'll take a while to shift away from a meta, because if, like, a team just practices one thing, like, just to counter GOATs, let's say, for an entire week, right? And they don't come up with something, then they have that's a week gone of practice, and they have to go into a match. So I think over time, you might see a slight variations and things like this, but it will take some time.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think that it's not necessarily that GOATS is still, the best, but the best, you have to consider that the best teams, for the most part, obviously strength of schedule aside, because we didn't get some teams like Gladiators that were looking very strong at the end of the stage into the next, they weren't playing week 5 and they weren't playing in the playoffs. So they've had a couple weeks, and I'm very interested to see what Gladiators do in particular, because they've had so much more time to prep on this patch as an excellent team. But for the rest of the teams that were good in the playoffs, they have not had very much time, right? They had a week, they probably took a few days off. Now they're getting back in. So teams are always going to go back to what they're practiced and disciplined on first and what they're comfortable with before they start really innovating again. So I think that GOATS will probably decrease as the stage goes on. But there's a lot of other stuff from watching teams practice so far on this patch. When we talk about Baptiste, I think there's sort of two philosophies for how Baptiste can be used. One of them is, like Wolf is saying, is that you replace your Brigitte player with Baptiste. And I think when we talk about what this means for teams, that means you're usually running Winston or Rhine goats with Baptiste instead of Brigitte. Pardon me. So what does this do? Basically, like, you have more consistent healing, because as Wolf was alluding to, in order to get consistent healing out of Brigitte, you have to be in range to hit people with her mace to trigger the Inspire heal. So Baptiste really provides a lot of poke, and you don't have to sacrifice the Discord orb to put pressure on the tank line. And so effectively, if you have high ground, especially on defenses, and you can actually chunk out their tanks, if they have a Brigitte, they're never going to be able to heal that tank line up quickly, and your Baptiste will be able to. So if you poke their tanks very hard, you heal up immediately, they can't heal, then you just rush their tanks, Discord orb them, and burn them down.
Not to mention that you can also use your amplification matrix plus Discord orb to kill them, and that will affect things like Reinhardt's Fire Strike. Yeah, I mean, you could throw Reinhardt's Fire Strike in, Zenyatta shooting through that, plus the Discord orb, plus Baptiste damage alone, even by himself from an angle that isn't expected. Like, I think people are thinking right now, the Amp Matrix, like, oh, look, what if Reaper ults into that? That would be crazy with a Pharah ults into that. I mean, that's not realistic, right? But even solo ulting as Baptiste as a flank can be crazy because he has mobility. He can jump into a place you don't expect and then pick somebody off. So there's like so much potential with that ultimate. It's actually crazy.
Wolf, I think you're actually on your webcam mic or something like that. Just
all right.
I want to check on that. Anyway, so I definitely agree with what Wolf is saying. Now, the opportunity you have is obviously to run Sombra and Tracer into the Baptiste comps instead of having the Brigitte in there, right? So if you don't have a Brigitte, then all of a sudden you can more effectively run the Sombra. You can start flanking. The other thing that Baptiste does is it shuts down the actual like 3 DPS compositions easier, because you have a lot of long range like damage to pluck a Pharah out of the sky or something like that. So if anything, I think the way the meta is going to evolve is that we will see sort of this rotation of like, is there no Brigitte? Then somebody's going to play Sombra into it. Are they playing Sombra? Then that composition is going to switch back to Brigitte. If they're playing Brigitte, you're going to run triple DPS. You're going to play, a Pharah, a Widowmaker, a Hanzo, these kind of things potentially. So I actually think by the end of the stage, we're going to be getting into a pretty like interesting circle of compositions, but I don't think we're quite there yet.
Yeah, it'll definitely take some time to evolve.
Well, being as you used like Titans already contrasted against what might happen in the future, let's do some of the other teams then. So what would the effect be on teams like Shock, for example?
Well, I think Shock's still going to be good because they have such a deep bench. Mm-hmm. Wolf, how's your mic doing there, buddy? I can't check Discord where you're typing right now.
I muted it
you sound better now. You sound much better.
Okay, I turned like everything down massively. My mic
sound incredible. Thank you. What do you guys think about Shock?
I think if Shock is smart, and I think they are, they're probably going to try to play GOATS as long as possible in this stage and hide what potential depth they have, because they're already so good at GOATS and it's still going to be viable and they can make small adjustments. But I think they'll probably save some of the depth of their lineup for when they really need a win, or potentially until playoffs if they can. I don't think they can keep it that long, but maybe if they play against something like, a team like Chengdu is going to do something weird, they're going to have a counter strategy prepared. But if they're playing against weaker teams, probably just going to see them run 3-3 as much as possible and try to hide that depth, especially early on before anyone really knows how the meta is going to settle into that kind of like, I don't know, almost love triangle-esque, like rock, paper, scissors you were describing earlier.
Yeah, I think Shock will actually be better off. I think they're still really good at GOATs, but like you said, they have a really deep bench. But at the same time, I think super strength. Although there's like all that memes about super bad on the stream or whatever, right? I think
to be fair, that most of us disagreed with that. That was a weird production.
Good.
Thing, not what we thought.
Awesome.
Yeah.
When I saw that, I was like, no.
No. That was mistakes were made.
Yeah.
We'll put it that way.
Yeah, but
it's also just like went into the meme part too much, didn't it? Like it was just too pleasing a narrative.
Yeah,
nobody wants to be disrespectful to any player.
Yeah. But like for the first few days, I feel like people thought it was serious. But like if you've played versus Super and solo queue, you know that like he's really really good. And even when you watch his VODs, like he's really really good, and he's improved a lot. And I think now that might be one of the negative points, because I think I'm not saying his Winston's bad, but in terms of his Rhine, it was very strong. So it might be like a trade off more so. That's how I'm looking at it anyway for the Shock.
So can the Shock become the number one team in this meta, though?
I think the Shock can be the number one team in this meta.
Yeah.
They were nearly the number one team in the last meta. I mean, I think it's completely reasonable to consider that they're still going to be a top 3 team at the very least. I'm curious, what do you guys like? If we have to sit around here and we have to pick out who do we think is going to perform better in this? Okay, I also didn't. I realized we didn't complete the conversation about the meta. So right now, what a lot of teams are doing, pardon me, is on defense, especially on 2CP, is we're seeing a lot of bunker compositions.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is we're seeing Orisa with like Bastion and Baptiste and Mercy. So a lot of attacks on assault maps are about breaking the bunker right now, which involves playing dive for the most part, or trying to play goats and get onto the point. And sometimes, as we've seen against Bastion compositions or against like hard point or bunker compositions, sometimes that involves Symmetra to like
Even
bypass. What?
Even Farahanzo, yeah.
Yeah, or Farahanzo, sure. There's a lot of theory. So you can play dive, you can play Farahanzo, you can use Symmetra to get onto the point, so they have to re-engage into your goats composition once you're on the point, like Symmetra goats. Honestly, I feel like goats is losing meaning because now we've got like so many iterations of it. We've got like Winston goats, Ryan goats, now Baptiste, Brigitte, interchangeable. Zenyatta's not always there. Sometimes it's Baptiste, Zen, or Baptiste Zen. Sometimes Baptiste Brigitte. Like, what does goats mean anymore?
Let's be real. Like, the term goats is always terrible, and it's. I feel like a lot of our viewers love to latch on to like these memes, right? And like a lot of people are like really, and I don't mean viewers on this show. I just mean Overwatch League viewers and eSports viewers in general. Everyone likes to latch onto the memes. Well, like the reason why we call it 3-3 on the broadcast is because it more accurately depicts what is happening, and 3-3 can still be correct even if a different variation. But we also use usually qualifiers like, Reinhardt Zarya 3-3, or Winston Zarya 3-3, and stuff like that. I think the term goats. I mean, we're using it here because it was a pretty hardcore audience and everyone knows what it means. Sure. But like, I don't know. I don't like using it that much because it just doesn't really describe what we're talking about. And I'm probably not really going to use it much ever again on the broadcast either.
I mean, it's like, what does goats mean? Because now we have like Brigitte-less goats. Is that still goats? I don't fucking know. Like,
there's a whole bunch of names.
No, I don't think so. Like, I think we just describe whatever becomes. There's going to be some core supports probably. Like Lucio, for example, always in the past was like permanent. No one's going to describe a comp. It's like blah, 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 Lucio. No one says like 2-2-2 dive with Lucio, like, because he was just there. No one said like, well, they're playing that Genji Tracer, also Lucio. You describe the part of the dive that changes, right? So I think when we look at what's going to happen moving into like all these swaps, we're going to say like they're running the Reinhardt, Zarya, or they're running the Winston Zarya, or the Wrecking Ball comp, or they're running this Pharah Mercy, and even if like one other hero is staple, we don't have to be like, well, it has Brigitte, so therefore it's still kind of goats. We don't have to do that. I think we just talk about the parts that change, and we're going to see a lot of changes. We're going to see a lot of weird shit just
Yeah.
in general. And some of it's going to fall on space.
Just as
Some
a
it's gonna
quick
be amazing.
aside, normally I don't find like attempts on subreddits at humor that funny, but there was that post yesterday that was actually so well phrased, where it was the satire post, and it said,
Yes.
"I just once said Owl viewer who also hated the dive meta, mercy meta, and grav dragon meta," which is like perfectly describes some of the people who do say like, "I hate goats." It's like, what do you like? You don't like anything, do you?
Yeah, like in Europe, we called we went the other route, Wolf, where we started calling it floats, moats, and like and then we had the Orisa little part when we called it bong goats, and like we had like a whole phrase. So instead of doing all that, I would agree that the 3-3 is probably the best thing.
The best
to
casting
say.
term that came out of Europe in terms of goats was Brig Prison, which is a DPS player who's trapped playing Brigitte.
That's good.
That's the one that really stuck with me out of Europe.
In some sense, that does define that meta.
By the way, Thor, I don't know if you saw this on Twitter. So I've been reviving. This is Curryshot. You'll appreciate this too. This is the LOL throwback, which is the space prison memes.
Oh, cool.
Which
Yes.
So remember that like old space prison book cover that I found. So for those of you who don't know, space prison used to be what we called CJ Entis, because they had this really terrible AD carry player named Space. So we used to joke that CJ and like Mad Life was in space prison. And so now, what I love about Space Prison is now Space Prison means exactly the opposite, which is that Valiant is the prison that has been designed to contain space. So now Space is like the good player.
Oh shit, that's great.
So inside the Valiant, no one can hear Space scream.
Exactly. So yes, I do love that now I can double dip on the space prison with exactly opposite meanings. But I've been enjoying bringing Space Prison back for all you Korean League of Legends fans out there.
I love that.
Hopefully,
the Fleta effect, man. Every time, this is a great example.
Oh boy, we'll talk about Valiant in a minute. Okay, so I got distracted. So what you guys are going to see is a lot of these like Bastion, Baptiste, Orisa bunker comps, and so there's going to be probably a lot of ways to beat them. Whether it's Wrecking Ball with Widowmaker to like drop down, pop somebody up, Widowmaker kills them. Whether it's Symmetra to bypass the point. Whether it's dive compositions, maybe even Doomfist potentially. So there's a lot of options I think the teams have that it's still very experimental on how to get through the bunker comps. You're going to see that probably a lot on Assault. Many of the other maps, you will probably see 3 DPS or Winston goats for the most part. And then one of the most interesting things you're going to see is some teams are going to run Baptiste with a DPS player playing out of the Brigitte position normally, or you're going to see it out of the flex support position. So lots of options. Like it's either going to replace Zen or it's going to replace Brigitte in various compositions. And then the Sombra is going to come back in. I actually think this is going to be a really cool meta, personally. I think there's a lot of options. I think it'll be Winston goats heavy at the beginning, but I think teams over time will go away from that.
Yeah, this is a meta where you're gonna have to be like really quick on calling hero swaps, and teams that are bad at realizing when they need to swap, or they're trying to use their ult and then swap and stuff like that, are gonna have problems. Like say you're running Baptiste instead of Brigitte, and then the other team starts running a strong Sombra team, and they start running Sombra against you, and you need that Brigitte back, or you need some way to deal with the Sombra. If you are like, no, I really want to use this ult right now, and I just think this healing is better, and you get stuck in that, or no one makes the call quickly to move away from that swap, then you're gonna have problems. So there's gonna be a lot more hero swapping than what we saw in Goats, which was just like, oh yeah, like there's a Pharah flying over the base, and then they're just gonna swap right after they got A on Numbani because you need to. It's gonna be a lot more complex than that.
Yeah, I agree. I think what Wolf's getting at is like a lot of times the compositional swaps were based off of points, whereas I think now it's going to be in reaction to the enemy composition.
Okay, what about this then? So a team I definitely want to talk about from the Stage 1 playoffs, and we can carry this through to this discussion, because it is bizarre how, as much as you want to tell fans, like, don't get too caught up in narratives. Like, don't create narratives that span years, I mean, already it's hard enough that, like, you know, New York Excelsior does have all those LW Blue players who always bomb out in the playoffs for no reason. But the worst one of all is that the Seoul Dynasty team, who was looking amazing when they beat NYXL, and then obviously was doing it all without Fissure again. So it's like that came up again. Well, if go back to Winston, isn't Fissure going to be back in the lineup?
Yes. I mean, I think Fissure is still one of the best tanks in the league. So
the drama never ends.
That's what I love about Fissure.
You can never bench him. You're never allowed to bench him.
What I love about Fissure, Fissure to me, because I'm not his teammate and because I am a great lover and admirer of Fissure, is that he's just endlessly entertaining. It's like, do I know Fissure is a terrible teammate? I fucking do. And I fucking love it. Like, I love every second of Fissure being a terrible teammate, because the thing about Fissure is he's so good that he can just do whatever he wants, and the team is like forced to like bend to his shot calling and his will. Do I love if I was coaching him, I think it would be miserable. But because I love the fact that he says, like, you know what, I think the coaches are wrong publicly, I'm just like, excuse me? So you're just going to be this insolent piece of shit? But I enjoy that about him. From the outside, it's honestly incredibly entertaining.
He's a likable villain. He's an anime character. He's a walking script. Like, everything that he does, like, you know what he's going to do next. He's the predictable character, but yet you like him. And then he fails and then goes to another team, and you're like, well, here we go again.
But also, he keeps being one of the best tanks in the league. Like, you can say whatever you want about his attitude, but you know who's fucking delivering on stage? It's this Fissure guy. It's amazing. I mean, he is just an incredible personality to have in the league and an amazing player.
He reminds me of why, when the first League of Legends players from Korea started to go to the other regions, I used to always say, like, the ones that should enjoy it the most are the ones who don't want to be in, like, the Korean system, you know, and have to, like, be super strict and stuff, because you can only imagine what some of the coaches in the Seoul Dynasty are thinking when they're like, what? The fans are flaming us for benching him, but, like, you know, he's a bad teammate though. And then all the fans are like, you idiots! Oh, you've done it again! You're just like the gladiators. And they're like, what's the right answer? Fisher's obviously like, this is a new world, boys. This is a new world. This is his domain, isn't it? It's like he's running prison, isn't he?
I mean, I just think that everything about, like, Fissure's narrative so far is just so fucking entertaining, because we talk about this on the broadcast and we started calling him the Revenant because he still hasn't lost to one of his former teams. So it's like every time he gets traded to someone else and he plays against them, he wins. Like, how does he fucking keep doing this? He's playing the Gladiators tomorrow, so I think it's going to be, like, incredibly entertaining to see if Seoul can beat the Gladiators and this continues. But, like, it's like this storyline is, like, almost unreal in how good it is for Fissure right now, because it just keeps getting more and more hilarious and he keeps playing better and better.
Exactly. And that is obviously the moment, wasn't it? They were like, right, well, listen, the results were good, so it's fine that we benched him. Winston's back in the meta. Fucking hell, right? Well, this is going to be awkward. Has he left yet? Can we call him back? Yeah, about that whole thing, you know, where it wasn't.
It was just a prank, bro.
Exactly, yeah. We never liked Reinhardt anyway, you know. Anyway, he played some of that, Winston, and yeah, shot call as well. Yeah, you can do that again as well. Yeah, it's all you.
I'm really hoping that this thing where he just keeps not losing to his former teams continues, but I also hope that he keeps getting more toxic, so he keeps getting traded to more teams. So eventually, like, he's going to roll through like 5 teams and he's still going to keep beating all of his old teams. And so eventually there's going to be nowhere else for Fissure to go, because he's going to be on that last team in the league, the 20th slot. And it's just going to be an undefeated stage for Fissure, like winning Overwatch League finals. That's what I hope happens. That's the ultimate narrative right there.
No, he's gonna go back to Contender. He's gonna go back to Contenders and join, like, the new version of Kong Du Panthera and just do it all over again. Like, Kong Du Panthera became Griffin, right? Griffin's not even in Contenders' career right now, but I mean, he's gonna go all the way back to Contenders and, like, go back to his original.
Well, you know,
team.
the irony here, Monty, is, like, if you actually look at the way the game's played out, what you should say is this is an example of how Overwatch League isn't an anime, right? Because if this was actually like an anime, then actually, you know, like someone like Ado, they should have their redemption arc. They've tried so hard. They've done everything right. This guy is the bad guy. The bad guy shouldn't win, obviously. But what's mad is that actually is more in fitting with an anime, this little storyline, because it's just such a sick character, isn't it?
Well, this is one of those animes.
Sorry.
This is like Naruto that has like a million seasons, man. You never know. Like, maybe he's going to get it in the end. Like, maybe in like season 37, like he's going to, maybe Otto will finally like make playoffs for the first time.
I just love Fissure because I in my history of being in esports, I think honestly, like the combination of his skill and personality, I like to think of Fissure as what Opto would have been if he ever got into like League of Legends. Just because he's sort of just this amazing individual player who's constantly at the top of his game, at the top of his position. But it's for some reason it's like absolutely impossible to work with him, and he keeps trash talking everybody and telling them they're idiots.
Sure.
So
and he boosts, right? What was that? Well, am I thinking of Otto? Or sorry, I think I'm thinking of the same person. Yeah.
Opto's
who
a
went
mad
to China.
booster, yeah.
Yeah, the one who went
he's
to China. Yeah, okay, yeah, we're thinking of the same person. Yeah.
And the difference is
that was a big thing.
Fissure hates boosters and Opto is a literal booster, but
yeah, it's actually like a Korean culture thing. Like a lot of the Koreans who haven't boosted, it's really, really serious to them. Like I would go as far as saying like it's like a felony to them. Like really.
Yeah, but
let's it's almost like match fixing. You can't do it.
Let's be real. If Fissure was banned from professional play, and like Opto was, and he had a chance to go to China to win hundreds of thousands of dollars for boosting, I promise you Fissure would do it. I think he would absolutely.
You mean he would boost in China for hundreds of thousands of
dollars? That's what
Opto
did in League of Legends. Yes.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I don't think anybody would disagree with that.
I don't know.
You know,
I think that
times. Desperate times.
I don't know, man. I think that's a bit of a stretch. Fissure is like he's like the most holy anti-booster, like, you know, in his mind at least. Like, I don't know.
To be fair, Opto, the thing we're talking about was not actually Opto boosting; it was him just ladder racing. But I can definitely see
sure. Yeah, I mean, Opto did obviously boost like a motherfucker as well,
but not that specific.
Let's not make that unclear in any extent. No, I mean, on that one particular topic, obviously Fissure is somewhat like Stannis Baratheon or something. It's like, even if you admit, like, listen, I did it and it was wrong, he's like, right, I accept your apology. Now cut his hand off. It's like, this is only fair. This is only, you know.
I mean, like everyone's had their moments, man. I like helped my younger sister beat Pokemon Red. You know, I helped her beat Misty. You know, like, you know, what are you gonna do?
Worst story I've ever heard of in my entire life. That's confirmed. That's so ridiculous.
I can't look at you the same way, Wolf. Now.
It's the way he said it, like it was some, like, you know, fucking dark secret from his past. Like, listen, you know that time my little sister beat Misty? Did she though? Did she have a little bit of help? You know, what did she pay you for that? Fucking soccer or something? What are you talking about? What was the boosting part?
I don't know. She didn't annoy me for the rest of the car ride.
Fair enough. Okay, then how did the Seoul Dynasty beat the NYXL then?
Michelle popped off. His Sombra was really good. It had been like okay throughout the entirety of stage one whenever he was playing it, but he played insanely well. His hacks on Jonak in particular were insane. His preventing of Jonak using the Transcends, which like I screamed and yelled about in the cast in that moment on Numbani. He just absolutely hacked all the right targets all the right times. And it's funny because it is a flex tank versus flex tank matchup, no matter which way you look at it, because the Sombra players are flex tanks right now in this meta. So watching Michelle versus Meko, when you think about this matchup, you think, well, Meko destroys him in every regard, until Sombra starts popping off here. Michelle is hacking all the targets. And Meko's biggest problem was he just couldn't find him. Like, that's the thing. The Diva player is always spamming. You see this all the time when you're watching a Diva player play against Sombra, is they're standing on the cart, for example, and just shooting in all directions, because that's how you reveal the Sombra. That's how you find where she is. And it's usually the Diva's job to find the Sombra. So it's actually kind of a cool thing, because it's still the same matchup in terms of flex tank versus flex tank, but it's Sombra versus the Diva. And Meko just couldn't find him because he was taking like long roundabout paths in order to find Jonak in a lot of these cases, and was hacking at the right moments. And it got into their head so much. I mean, everyone remembers Nenne's attempted solo grav because he was just like, this is, and that was such a controversial decision amongst everybody. Like, was it the right move? Was it necessary? It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, he tried it, he failed. But like, to get into someone's head that much that they're just like, they've already decided, and it was not a bad decision because they might have lost if they weren't able to kill the Sombra then, but to be in someone's head so much that he took the risk. He didn't have vision. You can go back and watch the first person. He thought that's where Michelle was, and he thought it would be worth it because he was so pissed and so like, this is it. If I can grab him, I can win. I can finally kill him, and we can win this map. We go to the next map. That he tried to solo grab there on Rialto and failed. And Michelle was just super in their heads. I also feel like Mono had one of his worst days of the league so far. He was super underperforming. Marvel got into his head from the start. Obviously, they only played that starting map with Marvel on Ilios, but he just had an off day too. Like the tanks that we highlighted all throughout the stage of being the best tank duo at setting up Diva bombs, hitting shatters, Mono and Meko, they're the ones you're thinking about. There's so many highlight reels of them throughout the entire stage one. They both underperformed. Michelle got into Meko's head. Mono was just not playing well because Meko was dealing with this Diva dealing with this Sombra and trying to anyways and failing at it. And in some ways, yeah, New York choked, but I think that Michelle and Seoul Dynasty, for the first time in a long time, came up with a really good plan for a tough opponent and executed it well. And they got it. They got the win. They lost to Vancouver right afterwards. But that's one of those series that really shows the amount of preparation that goes into a series that can pay off if executed correctly. Because sometimes there's two sides of the coin, right? If you prepare really well, but your execution is, everyone's just going to, you're bad, and they're going to laugh at you and say like, oh, look what they were trying to do. But that's pretty sad. Or you can have really good mechanics, really good execution of a strategy that doesn't make sense. And, if you put those two things together, it's hard to actually, on a playoff match day, an elimination match, actually make those things work. And Seoul did. And I don't think anyone expected that to happen. Sorry about my webcam, by the way. It's like popping off right now.
Okay.
What do you think, Curryshot?
About
anything you want, man. Seoul beating NYXL. NYXL doing badly.
About Seoul beating NYXL. I mean, they had a few. I remember like a few matches before that. They played, and it looked like NYXL was definitely the better team. So it was definitely surprising. But like it was stated, I think Marvel getting in a match really did get into his head too. So I think that had a lot to do with it too. But I know Mano. He's one of my really good friends, and I talked to him after, and he felt like he wasn't playing at his best either. So.
Yeah, Mono had a so Mono is usually an extremely consistent player, and like that was a very odd off game for Mono.
Yeah, it definitely was. Yeah.
So it may have been. I do agree with Wolf though that obviously you should expect the Sombra when you play against Seoul Dynasty. Maybe they didn't do as much prep as they should have. They could have been overconfident. We don't really know the answer to that, but they definitely did have an off game. One thing I will say in NYXL's favor though was that fucking map on Volskaya was absolutely insane from them. That's probably one of the best maps of Overwatch I've ever seen, and certainly just preposterously clutch. The way they saved point B on Volskaya in the time bank with like Jonak coming out on May, killing a Tracer, and then like headshotting a Mercy across the map was just, it was ludicrous. Like that is not a map they should have won. Like they should have just been knocked out of the series at that point in time. And then on top of that, they had to put together a pretty epic attack after that. But truly, I think that Volskaya map in that series is probably one of the top Overwatch maps we've ever seen played, and certainly a testament to NYXL's ability to clutch things out. But again, you come back on that last map and it was close again, and that grav, obviously a very controversial decision, whether you're going to try and catch Michelle Sombra. Personally, I disagree that they had to have. So here's the thing. If we think about Rialto C and NYXL being on the attack, I know they were concerned about the EMP, but I'm doing this off the top of my head. I believe they had Lucio and Zenyatta ults up at that point in time. And the thing is, the cart was sort of inside point C. And if they had been able to just position their two supports on the opposite sides of the wall, I think they could have survived that EMP. So I guess that was that decision didn't make the most sense to me, because I feel like the supports could have positioned around that in a way that they could have gotten the ults off. And even if one of them had been EMP'd, maybe not, it would have been very hard to, it would actually have been impossible straight up to EMP.
Yeah, also in that moment when Nenne knows where Michelle is, at least generally speaking, in that exact moment, the supports are safe and can't be killed by Michelle. It's just impossible for Michelle to get to them and kill them in that moment. So, you know, you in that moment, instead of using the grav, trying to make the hero play, you can instead then just like back off and split your supports apart. Because the hardest part about splitting your supports off is sometimes the Zen will be killed in that moment, especially because he has to not only position away from Sombra, but also has to make sure that the enemy Zen doesn't have line of sight and is just pummeling him with left or right clicks. So, I mean, Nenne was super beat up after that as well. Like,
yeah,
he was in tears.
There were a lot of...
Yeah.
There were a lot. Needless to say, we don't need to go into this. I didn't watch it again before this cast, so my memory is not the best about the end of that Rialto map. But I do think that was not necessarily the only play that they had available to them.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that, because I remember it too, because what happened was Fleta grabbed the fight before, right? And usually when you have combo and they don't have Zarya, you can get a free grav, you can get a free combo. But more importantly, when they don't have the counter grav, you can't counter grav the charge to stop your combo, right? So the combo will hit everyone, and you cannot stop the bash either, basically, with the counter grav. Usually what teams want to do is, if the team initiates the combo and they want to use grav Diva Bomb combo, they will counter grav so they can't pin, right?
Mm-hmm.
So basically they had the fight in the bag because Fleta used grav the fight before. So I do agree that it was a bit not necessary. Like, they could have just played standard and probably won.
Yeah, that was the feeling I had. I need to go back and look at it again, but I tend to agree with you based on my memory.
Sure.
Yep.
Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Like, it was I think it was a great upset by Seoul, an unusually strong performance by them, an unusually weak performance by New York. It is concerning, though, that New York, when it comes, and people
got a track record.
Yeah, I mean, they did win 2 stages. They won 50% of the stages last time, and also it must be said, stage playoffs don't really matter. They don't. It's $250,000. It's not the most amount of money, especially when you consider how many ways it's divided among Overwatch teams and the coaches and everything like that, compared to the grand finals, right? And it doesn't count for your record. So I do think sometimes people overstate the importance of stage playoffs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of prestige, and it's what culminates in a lot of players' minds of all the work they did in that stage, even though that's for the season playoffs. I think that's what they're playing for more than the money, or it doesn't mean anything else, really. It's like prestige and money. That's it. You're not going to get any extra points.
Surely, of all the teams who should argue the opposite, it should be the NYXL then.
Sure.
Just logically.
You're
just not this one time.
And I think that's why Nenne was the most upset about the loss, right? Because he's new to this team, and he's one of the superstars. And leading up into this, I think there could have been an argument that he was the best Zarya over Summon Su and over Sinatra, but it's a lot tougher to make that argument so clearly because he didn't win. And he also died and lost in the failed grav decision, right? So, for him, I think he was like, I was almost it. Like, I was almost there. Like, I was almost at the peak of the pyramid.
A team.
He was so close.
Obviously, he turned to the rest of them and said, I can't believe it. We lost. We were the best. And they were like, it's okay. You'll get used to this. Welcome to the NYXL.
Well, there's also like the history of LW as well, which hasn't been to be fair. Sometimes they didn't choke. Sometimes like Janus's lung actually collapsed and like they didn't have a tank. So it wasn't entirely their fault. Sure. But for the most part, they were, when the pressure was on, even when the core of this team was in Korea, they did tend to not do great, which is why the whole, like, I made that poster board with the choking LW and choking NYXL. So I think it's still a concern, and that's something that I think they haven't been able to adequately address as a team yet, which is weird considering how the resources of the organization certainly can hire them a sports psychologist or try and get over some of these issues.
Yeah,
and they have such a fucking insane roster.
Yeah, and obviously, like they are perfectly capable of putting together the best record in the regular season. They're undefeated this season. They were by far the best team in the last season of Overwatch League. So it is a weird problem.
How should they be contrasted to the new meta? What do you think, Curryshot?
I was sorry. I had a thought about Nenne in my head.
Yeah, go on. Tell us.
Like, I think.
Listen, anytime you have a thought about Nenne,
Yeah.
just go ahead and say it.
Yeah, definitely. So with Nenne, like he's actually so good, but I feel really bad that he's going to be defined by that one grav basically from stage 1, because like it was said, actually from an analytical perspective, when you watch, how he plays his Zarya, it's actually one of the best, like by far. But a lot of people are going to think otherwise now because of what happened.
So what you're saying is he underestimated the gravity of that situation.
Yeah.
Very
good.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man.
Well, it's
I feel
also like when we were talking about earlier, it's not necessarily that it was a bad decision. I actually think it's an interesting decision. I think it was overstated by the fans saying like, "Oh shit, he fucked it up."
And even when we were casting that moment, like it was like, "Oh, that's the whiff. Like this is it. Like they lost it." Well, we weren't watching his first person perspective. We weren't able to see that moment.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's like, when you look back at it, and anyone who like wants to perceive themselves as like people who make fun of players like that are trying to seem intelligent, like seeming like they know, like this guy is the feeder, this guy, wow, look at his grabs. Like you're actually the wrong one. Like the intelligent fan, the one who's looks back and actually gives some thought to this will like not remember him for this, but actually remember him for all those moments and then realize like this was just an honest mistake in terms of decision making.
Right.
Well counted. Yeah. You are the true hardcore elitist fan, Wolf. You win this one, sir.
Wolf is out snobbed the snobby fans.
Exactly.
I love
That's
it.
right.
Usually I do that, Wolf. That's my job on this show, but I'm glad you're here to do it this time.
I just had to substitute today.
That's right. Putting the plebs in their place, as is our want.
How do you guys feel about the whole how Paris did this stage with the Europe is known as one of the best.
Oh my god, here we go.
So this
I had to bring it up.
Wolf super bad. I'm glad you brought this up because I love Wolf getting tilted onto this. So it's actually interesting because I talked to a bunch of teams about Paris, and a lot of players told me, interestingly, that they think that it was a mistake of Paris's to come in and practice with the other teams because they felt like Paris taught everybody a lot about GOATS before the season began.
Yeah. And
I think that's a stretch. I think that's a stretch.
But Wolf, you can disagree with that statement. I'm telling you what other teams told me about playing Paris.
I'm not trying to disagree with you. I'm just trying to disagree with what people told you. Because like this wasn't that long of a time period to like suddenly like spew all like almost every other team is better at 3-3 than them that they played against. Like and they like that happened just from like some weird scrims or some shit. And like they taught everyone.
They just shut them out,
Yeah, I mean, I know. I think that's a stretch.
Well,
they just like gave everyone else their abilities, and then it's like, oh no, well actually we're the worst in the end. Like I don't know.
You should know that the scouting for Paris and. I love Fefe and I love a lot of the stuff there, but I was in Europe before in Nenne, right? I was on 1 point, and before that I was in Nenne again. So I've been around basically, and I was on 1 point in Europe, and we basically scrimmed Paris a ton. And this I don't mean this in a disrespectful way. Might sound a little bit spicy, but they were like probably the 6th best team in Europe at the time. And compared to the Contenders teams, really. And you could also see that in terms of let's say putting them Shadowborn on Zarya, right, who doesn't have that much experience, when you have Zarya's like only got hardest mirror even, right, in Europe, that they're not even being scouted, and even like Cloudy being on the roster not being played, Gray also not really being played that much, right? So there's a lot of that people don't really take into account, and I feel that Europe as a region is getting like all the Contenders players feel like shit basically, because now they're being represented like this. But there's actually a lot of things that people don't know that. Yeah.
Maybe it was a cycle then, because we'll reference an old meme that we had on Summoning Insight, right? But I'll give it a new twist. So obviously what happened is when they were over in Europe, they were scrim vampires to all the teams better than them. They took the knowledge from them.
Exactly.
And then they were like, haha, jokes on them. Then they went over to NA, and then they got scrim vampires, and then eventually they lost all their life force. So in the end, they were just like
let's slow down for a second, because like
okay,
people are saying like, oh, EU is represented badly because Paris, which is a European team, right?
Sure.
That's it. He's so triggered that the internet just can't.
He actually just tilted out in the Discord call.
He just can't comprehend the fact that people are aware that Koreans play.
There
he is.
All right.
You lagged for a second.
We didn't hear shit.
Say it again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I heard in my headset that I had lagged out, so I didn't say anything. But I have. We have to remember that the EU team or the EU region has the second most players next to Korea in the Overwatch League.
Oh, yeah,
Some of the best non-Korean players are European, scattered around. Just because this team of weaker Europeans is all European doesn't mean we have to say, fuck EU, that's a shit region now, am I right? Like, look at Paris.
Yeah.
I think that's not fair. Like, EU is actually the second best region next to Korea. Like, I think that's kind of like a fact, right? That's not even really arguable at this point. So the really people are like, oh yeah, I'm so bad. My region, this makes my region look so bad now. I just like, what are you even thinking about? Like, look at all the European players that are scattered around Overwatch League teams that are fantastic.
Yeah. But on the flip side, I really think also I want to go to the opposite direction, because I'm not like an EU fanboy. I've been in NA and EU. I think there are a lot of talented players, but then at the same time you have these some European contenders players who are just always complaining on Twitter on why they're not in OWL and stuff like that, and why they're the best region. I definitely don't support this, especially because some of these players, even a spicier take, are rumored and like they're to even cheat. You know what I mean? In terms of leaking VODs and stuff like this. So you know what?
Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. You just mean leaking VODs.
Well, that's what I consider cheating. Like, I'm a very ethical person, and if you're not being ethical, if you're not being
shot.
All right, this Twitch clip is on the top of Reddit.
The most ethical person. Everyone else is unethical. Sad.
So you have to realise that the headline now, Curryshot, for this is Curryshot. I think the European players cheat, and that's the end of the quote.
No. I didn't say that.
No, that's the way clickbait works.
There's so many ethical people in Europe, but there's some that are not, and they can just complain about
I love Europeans. They're so ethical. Unlike anyway.
No, full of talent. Europe is full of talent.
These are some fire Trump quotes. Anyway,
he's getting deeper and deper into it, isn't he?
Oh man, what have I done? I did not mean this.
Anyway, moving aside, yes, I do understand what you're saying. And also, European pro players and whining name a more iconic duo. But
some, yeah.
No, in general, I think that's pretty fair across titles. Euro players,
there's some that are very talented.
They're talented, and also they whine.
Sure.
And they do complain a lot when they see players that are worse than them, and they get very offended, which is fine. I mean, they should be. But in any case, you mentioned a bunch of Zarya players, and I think one of the criticisms that's been leveled against Paris, and since you were working in that region, is that this team was assembled badly.
In my opinion, yes. Yeah, I definitely think it was, again, in terms of Zarya's, I'm going to say it again, hardest mirror Onigod. You could definitely tell, even by statistically speaking, when they were bringing up statistics, right, that they had one of the worst Zaryas in the league, and I could definitely tell when I was, because there were the POVs that were coming out with the Alexis Pass, that you could see that bubbles are not being used correctly, and in terms of average energy, it wasn't there. There was a lack of understanding really from Paris' Zaryas, from what I was seeing in GOATS, and in 3-3 Zarya is one of the most important components of that composition, right? So
when we were looking at the stats for Paris, after a few games, obviously we needed a few games to see them, it became very clear that nobody on Paris was doing damage, and their Zaryas were like bottom damage on both Soon and Shadowburn were pretty low in terms of final blows per 10 minutes and overall damage per 10 minutes on Zarya. And some teams could get away with that in the Overwatch League as long as somebody was doing damage. But it became very clear that nobody was doing damage on Paris. And in a meta that is all about pushing through enough damage to counteract sustain, that's a big problem.
And see, this is one of the problems, again, a spicy take, but in Europe, like, there's a lot of nepotism, right? Where in terms of who's going to play, it's all basically who they prefer. So, like, for instance, Cloudy, we haven't seen him.
That doesn't happen in any other team. Never.
No, I mean, but okay, like Cloudy, for instance, this guy is really, really good, and it really sucks that he didn't really get to see much. So,
well, he's still on the team. So.
Yeah, I know, but
well, in any case, like
in stage 1.
All right, so since we're on the topic of Paris. Now, I know Wolf like tilts to the moon whenever people are like said that like Paris would be good, but realistically, looking at what was going on coming into the league, they were looking strong, at least from the teams we talked to and my own observations of obviously scrims, which are not always the best indicator, clearly. But also just from if a lot of people were praising the coaching staff coming into this because you have Demon, who is an experienced Overwatch coach coming from the Valiant. You have Feifei, who's coming in from Eagle Gaming, which was traditionally a strong GOATS team in Europe. You have Seita, who's coming in from, he's been an excellent tank coach for Gigante forever. Definitely. So I think it is fair to say that this coaching crew was sort of like a European GOATS/tank all-star coaching crew. So there was a lot of reason to be excited about what was going on with it.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think like...
But plus Monty, didn't Demon, when he was on the episode with us, try to go that route of arguing that, like, Koreans aren't even that much better and, like, all the players in Overwatch are really good, which obviously now, famous last words in many ways, like, I mean, you might want to take some of that back because obviously we were trying to ask him, like, how are you going to do it with all the European players? And
so yes, he did. He did say that, and I think like now he can transition into Demon going over to the Dallas Fuel now, which was a voluntary decision. Like he stepped down from that team, and so here's the other thing. What this says to me is if Demon is voluntarily leaving a head coaching position at Paris to be a tanks coach for the Dallas Fuel, I'm going to go ahead and think that there's probably something else going on there. So I think also my read into this situation is that there may be other teamwork or like interpersonal issues that are going on within that team, which also could have certainly affected their performance. Like you don't randomly volunteer to resign from being a head coach of Paris Eternal to go be an assistant coach of the Fuel. That's not a normal thing.
Yeah, agreed.
Especially after one stage.
Yeah, you're right.
One stage, like come
on.
But
he needed to get out of Paris because they've let down the whole EU region, and he's going to be tainted by that forever. So he's got to align himself with a strong NA brand. Keep the meme going.
So yeah.
I'm trying my hardest not to spill this.
Yes, the juice.
Yeah. So yeah, there we go. So
okay.
I'm just gonna sit here and nod.
Yes.
Screw the juice cap on tightly.
Yes, Curry. Frequently, we also know the juice, but we can't ever talk about it on this show because that's proprietary information that people have entrusted us with. And so I, too, know the juice. But instead, we will speculate. Yes, we will make educated speculations.
Exactly.
There we go. I'm learning now. See, I'm learning.
See,
I haven't done this as long.
Here's how you do it, Curryshot. I'm going to tell you right now. Okay, here's what you do.
Sure.
You formulate an educated speculation. So when the juice gets spilled later by somebody else, you look really smart.
Ah, okay,
right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't get in trouble.
The best thing, by the way, the best one ever, is where you just present what you know behind the scenes as your opinion. And then later on, when all the fans say you're wrong, then when it comes out, you're like, see, these stupid I told everyone 6 months ago and this was going to happen. And actually, the whole time, you were just, because you actually were obliged not to say it, was information you got from other people. Yeah. You just look like a fucking genius who's prescient and ahead of the whole matter.
Yeah, exactly.
See, I've done something like this before where, like, back in League, you guys know Huhi?
Yes.
Sure. Yes.
So I made a comment about him, like, playing versus Faker and, like, doing really well or whatever. And, like, a year and a half later, he plays versus him at MSI, and they actually win the match, right? But I remember I saw the Reddit, and I was just mass downvoting. I just got insults like all over the place. But I was like, yeah, I knew that was gonna happen.
Yes,
that's
Oh,
right. The other trick is you make so many predictions. We call this the slasher trick. Okay.
Okay.
So recently, Slasher decided to necro a tweet that he made about Runaway being the best team in the world, like a week or two after London won the Overwatch League finals.
Yeah.
Which was wrong. But the thing is, if you tweet every team is the best team at one point in time, you can always necro it later and look smart, because no one's going to go back and see that you tweeted those other things. So that's the other trick.
That's why
Also,
I
just
tweeted
delete
out
all the other
Twilight.
ones.
That's why I tweeted Twilight's the best Zenyatta in the world, like, because I believe it now, but everyone's mad at me and everyone's saying I'm wrong. But like later, I could just go find that. I could just Google Proxy Wolf Twilight is best Zenyatta, and then copy paste that into another tweet like 6 months later and be like, I don't know, guys, what's going on?
One of my friends from India too had an approach like this called he called it the shotgun approach.
Yes.
Right? Where when he'd go to like any like female, he would just like literally ask them all like in a line,
Of course.
and just eventually something happens. So
But see,
I guess I see that.
That's also as a tangent. That is also actually the most effective way to date, because you're actually confident. If you don't fear rejection, then the only option is like you just walk up and talk to girls, and then if they reject you, you don't give a fuck because it's not going to work anyway. And if they
It's
like
called
you,
the Fissure approach. To
the Fissure approach.
No, they don't like you. Who gives a fuck? Who's next? Right. Look at what I was doing before. I left her. So pretty sick, isn't it?
All right. Well, there's
Can
the
be
name of the
effective.
episode, the Fissure approach.
Ooh,
exactly.
I like it. I like it.
Exactly.
It's very nice.
Agree. Except hopefully you don't get divorced as many times as Fissure does.
Sure.
That gets expensive after a while,
Oof.
Also, can we not just all narcissistically attempt to not be proven right now with solid analysis, just at some point in the future plant the seeds of something that could one day vaguely be considered correct, even though we ourselves know.
I said it right now. I said it
much.
right here. I'm saying it right here. Washington Justice wins Overwatch League one day.
Wolf is like Wolf is like
Okay.
bald in 20 years, and then Justice when he like necros a tweet, or like he just like he like Twitch
Find this
clips
Twitch
this
clip.
in like 2 decades. He's like, look how fucking smart I was.
Yes.
Justice is the best.
No one
team.
believed me. No
So
one.
this is why we always say, so this is one of the things that always tilts us about fans, right? Is because the only thing that's important is the logic that goes into a
course.
prediction, and not the
Yes.
actual result of the prediction. Like, it's a thought experiment, and like you could make a prediction with a 50.1% opinion of accuracy, but you have to pick something, so you pick that
Yes.
thing. But it's always about the logic. So just saying.
But Monty, I saw your power rankings weren't as accurate as some of the other analysts.
Dude, the best ever example was like there was a League of Legends tournament. I think it was season 6 Worlds, because this was the one where famously like a wild card team from like CIS region beat the #1 team in the world that was Korean. So as a result, when people did the pick'em bracket, right, obviously it just ruined the whole bracket for everyone, right? But there was one dude at the end who had like an alive bracket.
Oh yeah.
And then people said, like, how did you do it? And he just goes, I was drunk when I filled the bracket out. It was like out of like 30 million people, there's only one dude. And he even just said, like, yeah, I fucked that up.
Yeah, he was like, I was wasted. Like, it was like,
that's genius.
cool. That was really funny, because I forgot that like people found that guy out of like all those people who
of
like
course.
interviewed him. So funny. Like, that was fantastic.
Oh
But yeah,
my
the other
God.
thing that I love is at the end of this is like another thing that tilts me about fans and power rankings. So what happened was, at the end of the first stage, they rated, like, somebody did a rating on the interval of error, I believe it was, between
Right.
like the power rankings that everybody made, even though some people made power rankings for the whole season, some people made power rankings for stage 1. So like, but the whole purpose of a power ranking is never to show the end result of a stage, because you have to
Yes.
remember that when we make a power ranking, when teams only play 7 games and they don't play each other all the time.
Yeah,
Strength
it's
of
not even
schedule,
equivalent.
strength of schedule is like incredibly important. So
Definitely.
where a team is in the rankings isn't how good they are, right? It's a prediction of how good that team is overall. And if somebody has a very
At that
easy,
time,
at that moment in time also. So it's like, if somebody has a very easy schedule, Philadelphia, and somebody has a very, but a much harder schedule, Guangzhou Charge. Like these are things that, doesn't mean that Philadelphia is a better team than Guangzhou if they were to meet at that moment. Also, people don't realize that even if I were to rate a team ahead of another one in power rankings, it doesn't mean that I think in a head-to-head matchup that team would necessarily win that's higher, because maybe I think there's a bad matchup there that a lower seed team could exploit, because it's about against the field, right? Not against a specific opponent. So like when you try and take the power rankings and compare them to the stage results, it doesn't make any sense, because that's not the fucking purpose of a power ranking in the first place.
Maybe people got confused by the name. Like, it's a power ranking. It's not the fucking power reader from like Dragon Ball Z or something. Right? The power level is at like 8,000, like whatever.
It's not like Monty said. I hope this is what I predict the standings will be after stage 1.
Exactly. Yes.
That would be a different thing that I would have made.
Which is why calculating it doesn't make any sense. How could the interval be different? Where was the final actual power ranking for the season? There was an official one of those?
No. The whole point was it was everybody's power rankings versus the standings, which is not what a power ranking is.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the part that obviously doesn't make sense. Yes.
Now, if it was after stage 4, and you couldn't say they were wrong, but you wanted to say, look at how things changed based on the start, that would be kind of interesting, right? Like, how, what do people thought before the stage started, or before stage 1 started, and where we ended up in terms of standings before the season playoffs? That would be interesting, but
you also have the same problem, which is that in this year of the Overwatch League, teams play 2 games against their division opponents, only 1 game across the division. So strength of schedule, even at the end of the season, is still significant, right? And also, there is literally no way a human being can predict patch changes. So like making a season
and transfers, everything,
transfers, coaching changes, ownership changes.
Some groundhogs could, but like no human being.
But like
and no computers.
Especially in esports, out of all things, because we have all the normal shit like trade windows, player signings, everything like that normal sports have. And guess what? We also have this thing called patches. So like trying to predict the end of the season at the start of the season is just completely absurd. So
speaking of completely absurd, should we talk about the LA Valiant's potential trade with the Boston Uprising? Because here's the thing. I'll start off on a light note, because actually it's a bit of a depressing story. There's a lot of fuckery in the scene. All I actually thought was, when I went to the Twitter of one of the players involved in it, asking the guy who was on the Uprising like academy team or whatever, and I saw that, unfortunately, because the poor guy got completely wrecked and thought he was joining the Overwatch League, he just tweeted, "They completely broke me," or something. It's like, fucking hell, he actually got the full Valiant experience without getting any of the salary.
Oh, man.
Yikes.
There we go. Anyway, right, now into serious stuff. What did you think about this aspect where, like, that sounds like the amount of fuckery that went on with that thing, where it was like the story was like, they were going to do a trade, and then one of them was like, hold up a minute, this contract isn't what you said it is. Right, well, we'll agree to new terms on that one. Right, the deal's happening, but can everyone keep it secret? Yeah, sure. One guy tells everyone else. Everyone else. Yep, it's definitely happening. Players are just tweeting out, wow, that deal, I can't believe that's definitely happened then. And then somehow at the end of it all, it didn't even happen. What? What is this?
Okay, I might be completely wrong here, but that's how I heard about it, by the way. Like, it was just floating around everywhere, and everybody knew about it. But I don't know, like, what exactly happened with the whole deal, because from what I heard, basically Reddit actually had some sort of a play with it, believe it or not.
That
and
hurts
how
me
like
to
they read how
hear.
Huck was
That hurts
getting.
me to hear.
Yeah.
Don't tell them that as well. You're giving Reddit all this power. Like now they're going to be like every trade. If we actually riot and turn this motherfucker down, will they cancel the trade?
But I think
there are clause in there.
I think that is so stupid that like
That needs to be a new clause in deals. It should say if, like Reddit, basically, if there are 15 threads on the front page within 24 hours of this deal going live, the deal is null and void. Yeah,
It's canceled.
back at that point.
to me that when I heard about that, I was like, wait, are they really looking at Reddit and then deciding, oh, okay, this guy who has no like qualifications, I got to listen to him. Let's do it.
You guys, Reddit needs to
Hit the button.
If Reddit's afraid of a trade happening, like if they're really scared that, like, I don't know, that Bumper is going to go to Washington Justice, they should just like somehow, like, you know, get together and crowdfund something, pay like Benchmob to tweet that there's a report this is going to happen, and then Bumper will be like safe forever. Like he will not get arced. Okay,
this is basically Reddit plays general manager. Like when Twitch played Pokemon or whatever, they're now playing general manager on the Overwatch League. That used to be a joke in like League of Legends. That's happening now.
Yeah. Actually, like I'm in the wrong business. I think like if that's a power that Reddit has, like, I don't know.
I mean, Reddit plays general manager. They'd be like, unbench Taimu, rehire Coco, put Envy back together. Washington Justice #1 team. Overwatch is an anime. It'd be terrible.
Oh, Monty fired immediately. But obviously, the best thing is, Monty, you know the reason they'd fire you? Unprofessionalism, even though that's in no way what you ever did. Because that's always the one they go with, isn't it? It's like unprofessional. Anything he doesn't like, unprofessional.
what I love...
Monty likes oysters. I don't like seafood. Unprofessional.
What I love about being called unprofessional is, like, I look at my contract and I'm like, okay, so this is my job. At no point in my contract does it say I can't make fun of you on Twitter, that I have to deal with fucking abuse from people. It's not like, it doesn't say Monty must accept trolling and not insult people back. I don't go after people unless they insult me. And it's like, Monty can't make jokes. Monty can't curse. Monty can't make his own content.
Can't underrate the Houston Outlaws. That's unprofessional.
And you know what's hilarious about this whole thing is, like, people get so mad, and you know what happens? Like, my bosses are all like, you're fucking great, Monty. Keep up the good work. And I'm like,
engagement, yeah.
Let's go.
Dude, someone's drafting a tweet at you right fucking now, Monty, dude.
You're savage on League, like actually savage on League. I remember those days.
It's all right. We're bringing it back slowly. See, we had to vaccinate the Overwatch audience. Like the Overwatch fans were like, a little bit of the we had to introduce them slowly to the disease. They're actually becoming more immune. I am impressed. Like the amount of outrage this season is now significantly less. So as that goes on, we can just start to dial it up. We'll dial up the spice more and more, and then we'll get to the ridiculous place we were in League of Legends, and it'll be glorious.
Yeah, that was definitely the level that was most interesting. Like, when people do about storylines, like there seems to be like a shift in between what kind of trash talk is okay and what isn't, right? In terms of what's acceptable. In League, it was completely different, Like it was actually encouraged. You had people like Double Lift and stuff like that, coming in with saying, everybody's trash or whatever, right? I feel like if somebody said that, like right now in Overwatch, it would be like an outrage or something like this, you know what I mean? So I do agree that eventually I feel like it's okay to talk like this,
Unless it was the general manager of the Paris Eternal reviewing his season. Then just be honest.
I mean, the thing about it though is, like, I feel like Bumper is helping out with that. I feel like Super is helping out with that. We do have like an increased level of
Fissure, obviously.
Fissure. So like I feel like the players are becoming more comfortable, and I've actually spoken to several of these players about this aspect too, and they're starting to. So I think part of it too was like, when we have so many of these different players that are young and they haven't done this before, you do start to get numb to it over time, where you're not as, the first time it's like, holy shit, I can't believe that guy said that about me. The second time it's like, fuck that guy. Third time it's like, actually, it's kind of funny and I'm going to trash talk back, right? So it becomes less severe over time. So we're getting there. I feel like this podcast is sort of the vanguard, where we're just, it's like that scene from A Clockwork Orange where the fans were just strapping them in, and then their eyes are just open and like watching Fissure and like OverSight and Super and Bumper trash talking and Dogman yelling Cruz as a feeder, and We'll get there, guys. We'll get
I
there.
mean, the thing is,
you will
like,
you will be acclimated to so many horrible things by the end of this year that you won't even bat an eye at it anymore.
I mean, Cruz was super cool about it too when they did that interview with them, where he was just like, "Yeah, I mean, like, this is totally fine." He even, I think, tweeted like, "Why are you guys trying to, get mad at Dogman right now? Like, this is fine." Like, he's like, he said something along the lines of like, "I have 1,000 other more important things to worry about than this." Like,
well, it's also even in Watchpoint, they had an interview with Cruz and Dogman together, and
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
Dogman was basically like, "I do that to hype myself up. It's not about you." And players react in different ways, and legit. Trash talking is a fucking super legit thing to do in a match. It is a competitive situation, and if you can get inside that other guy's head, do it. It's your job to win. If that's a way that can help you win, fucking do it.
Oh my god, it's so funny you say that. There's a player in who is an EU Contenders called Horthick, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who he legit types like just passive aggressive comments or just like teabags almost every time on certain players, and they just lose it. They literally lose it, and that was actually one of the like strategies that he has, and it works. It works really well.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I mean, yeah, you're spot on with that one.
Yeah, I think it actually is important both for the scene and I think over time. And I think the other aspect of it too is that Overwatch's league's audience is younger, and so they do tend to be a little bit more extreme in their reactions to things. But like I said, we'll just keep calling them plebs, tell them to grow the fuck up, and eventually we'll get there. It might take a while.
I enjoy it, so and that's why like a lot of in terms of my reputation is, I guess that's the one thing that people don't like, but I'm just doing it for fun, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
Like, I mean nothing but yeah.
Okay. Actually, why don't we then do that conversation I teased at the beginning then? Because I wanted to get kind of your take on this Curryshot. Like, how do you see Overwatch in that sense? Like, do you see the similarities between League and the MOBA aspect? Because obviously people so heavily tunneled on the FPS aspect early on. I mean, famously, some of the most hilarious lines, like Koreans can't play FPS games, all the great stuff that turned out to be aged like fine wine. Didn't it?
That was also another slasher prediction, which was Koreans can't aim. So
it's actually like that's a great question, because I'm really happy you asked this, because again, another hot take that GOATS was actually something good to me. Nobody believes this, but it was good. Yeah, I love it. Like, I think it was one of the best things to happen, only because Overwatch is a really fast-paced...
a guy called Curryshot should fucking love GOATS.
Yeah. Okay, Overwatch is a really...
That is a spicy take. Keep going. Yeah.
Overwatch is a really fast-paced game, right? And GOATS, what it did, it really slowed it down, right? So back in stage 1, if you're hearing teams communicate, they're just screaming targets and stuff like that, right? And now those teams that are screaming targets are not really succeeding as much, because there's a lot of game knowledge that needs to be there. So like in League, if somebody messes up an ability, you can go on them hard. If they mess up a flash, whatever, right? Right now, if somebody messes up a bubble in comms, like the reason why like I was on one point and we were doing really well, and even Mayhem, like we're first in our groups always, is because that's one of the things I fix is talking. So we're just talking about cooldowns the entire time, right? So if you see something, we go. You need to notice your windows of opportunity. So it's like a MOBA in that sense. And that's why I really like GOATS, because there's a lot more thought involved, and it will evolve the game. Like ZP made a quote that it will evolve the game in the future, because people will think more about every cooldown and stuff like this. So I really like the aspect of GOATS. And pathing too, like pathing a certain way if they have like grav, for instance, not just running down the same way on retakes every time. There's so much to learn, and it's one of the reasons that in the teams that we are, when I do these game like this macro, we excel at it. It's because we think about all this, and that's why I like it. It's more like a MOBA more than just
it's a MOBA
an
team
FPS.
though, is effectively what it is.
Exactly, it is.
And that's why that's also why the reason after we got you as a guest today, Curry, that I wanted Wolf on here too, was because he's another MOBA analyst. So like there's a very different approach, and I know we've talked about this before on the broadcast when it comes to like. Seagull like posted this video. He's like, "What's wrong with Overwatch?" He's like, "It's becoming too cooldown and dependent and like too much about abilities." I'm like, okay, but if you like MOBAs, you don't really have a problem. Like, you're just complaining it's not FPS enough, which isn't what it's supposed to be. But I think for all of us here, we come from a MOBA or like Wolf and I come from MOBA RTS background, so all of this is actually really interesting to us.
It is.
Yeah, and I
By the
think
way,
that like
just as a quick aside, shout out to ZP for actually the most genius prediction, because what people will forget is that technically evolve doesn't actually even mean it's positive. If it just changes in any way, he's right. It did evolve the game. That's
Yeah.
actually the most genius prediction.
That's
He's
the best.
covered all his bases. Exactly.
I think there's always going to be shifts in the meta because we're always going to have patches. We're always going to have new heroes, and heroes are going to get reworked. So I think the best way to think of it is like the FPS fans and the MOBA type fans. You know, if they have different things they're looking for, is like it's kind of like a yin yang, right? Like they're going to have both sides be important, and the pendulum is going to swing sometimes when patches come out.
Yes.
Even if you go back to the beginning of Overwatch, we had a lot of Reinhardt. Sorry, the meta was a little bit more similar. We had a lot of quad tank, like NVS was running this a lot, right? And then, we swung back to dive, and people got a little bit tired of it, and people wanted to see more macro play. They wanted to see slower play. They couldn't keep up with the dive. They were like, I can't, this is too much for me. 12 players on the screen. I don't know what's going on. Now we swing back to 3-3 now. We're back in the slower meta. We're in the GOATS meta. And, I think we might be seeing the pendulum turning slowly in this next stage. It's impossible to predict, but it feels like it might be turning, at least, shifting a little bit more towards the FPS aspects of Overwatch. There's always going to be that yin and yang balance of this game, and that's why it's so fucking awesome. That's why people loved, TF2 back in the day as well, because a lot of things you have to manage, and you've got swapping of heroes and things like that. It's not just the guns you're buying like CS:GO. Now I'm not trying to knock on CS:GO, but like this is a different type of FPS, and it's never going to be the same meta forever. And I think people are scared. The FPS fans are like, this is not what I liked. I started watching Overwatch before, and this is not what I liked. And it's going to swing back. You can look at StarCraft 2, which had a ton of patches as well. Heart of the Swarm, people really didn't like it overall. But some players whose styles were well suited to that meta enjoyed it. And some people who like to play like that enjoyed it. But it wasn't forever. It just wasn't forever. Nothing is ever going to be forever in a game that's constantly updated.
I think that Curryshot's right though about like the way, and ZP is right about the way people think about the game will change from here on out. And that's the thing about having a young game, is I feel like a lot of the FPS players that came over to Overwatch never really had to think about these things in previous games if you're just a hit scan specialist. And I think it's really going to deepen and advance the game as time goes on, as ZP is implying, because it's forcing FPS specialists to play like a MOBA. So instead of just being focused on the FPS angles, now they're going to have the skill set to take into future thought. And also, I don't have a problem with GOATS as long as it's not the only thing in the meta. But would I like certain teams to be very good at like more of the MOBA style play, and then I'd like to see some of the teams be better at the FPS style play? I want to see what that looks like when they play each other, right? I think that's one of the best parts of Overwatch, is you get to see that.
Yeah.
But right now we're only seeing one thing, so hopefully that'll shift.
I mean, also like one thing, triple DPS and quad DPS were coming out too to counter this, because most teams started going towards the Zen Goats, and Zen Goats is good in the mirror, right? So then people would start going, okay, well, the first variation with the Moira is not there anymore, and we can go ahead and take multiple angles and then just go triple DPS. We'll have the Zen too, so if the snowball push doesn't work, we'll go ahead and still have one of the major ults, which is Transcendence or whatever, if they're running the triple DPS variant, right? So I mean, there was a bit of different compositions coming out, but I feel like it's better to innovate than just to imitate, right? And I feel like a lot of the teams were just trying to imitate, which is why it took a while for this to come out, because there were some teams that were already running this, and it took a while for it to actually like come out really. So I don't know if the comp, if GOATS is going to be the only thing in the meta, like we talked about earlier. I think eventually people will start figuring it out too. So, but yeah, I agree that GOATS shouldn't be the only thing in the meta.
Well, and I don't think it will be either, because like we are going to see more things in this patch for sure.
Yeah,
because the introduction of Baptiste and not running Brigitte all the time already creates more potential counter comping. So,
yeah.
I think actually one of the most underrated aspects of how the meta change affects the strength of the teams as well is like, especially when it's like a radical meta shift, the people who are doing the different elements of the shot calling seems to change. which is actually very different from almost any other esports game I'm aware of. Like if you're like the leader of a team in most other games, you're the leader of the team. You make the certain overall call, or you're part of like a hierarchy of protocols. But obviously, depending on what heroes are played and what hero has to do what, it absolutely changes the comms, right?
Well, think about it this way. So if League of Legends was played from a first-person perspective, different metas would have different shot callers, because imagine League of Legends from first person, but you're only team fighting and you're not laning. So you can't see the entire field of battle. So let's say if you're playing a top lane tank meta and your Maokai is the one that's going to engage, then all of a sudden the Maokai player shot calls because he's going in first and he can't see anybody behind him. So nobody can call him to go in first. He has to take that opportunity. Then you're going to have this issue where his engagements and his shot calling become much more meaningful. Or alternatively, if he can't see the positioning, then let's say the Maokai is going to go in, right? This is probably a better example. So let's say the Maokai is going to go in, but the Maokai, if he's from the bird's eye view, if he's from top down, the Maokai can see anybody who he's going to engage on. So the tank can engage on anybody, and he knows where his teammates are. But let's say, I've got these allies behind me that I can't see. So I need my support player to make sure everybody is in position behind me, so then I know when to go in. So in different metas, you can have very different options about who is shot calling, and it's because of the perspective. When you can see everything that all your allies can see, it's very different, right? Whereas if you're playing an assassin out of the top lane and you're going to come in second, you might need to call like a flank, and I'm like hiding in a brush or something, or I'm hiding out of vision. And so that means that I'm going to be the one who calls that engage as opposed to my support player. So I think that's a good way to think of it in terms of a MOBA style.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're looking at GOATS versus let's just say the sniper meta, the Widow versus Widow meta, you're going to have so much less information if you're all clumped up in one space. So you really have to decide how you want to fight and who's going to make these calls. And is the initiator going to be the one that says, let's go in? Because before, like, you've got a Widow who's trying to snipe, but when he's not scoped in, he has a full view of the battlefield, the same way that Afara does, for example. It can point out Zen's out of position, Zen's low, I just tagged him. Whereas, sometimes in GOATS, like, the Ryan just can't see that much. He's holding a shield up and he has some sort of field of view around him, but he can't see around the corner. He can't easily check around the corner. He doesn't know where the enemy Ryan is, so a lot more communication changes in that moment versus something like a dive. So, yeah, it's important to think and remember that Overwatch vision is like in a 3D sphere, and it's not, the players playing the game cannot see what the free cam observers are showing. They cannot see that oftentimes.
And that's why, like I was saying earlier, that the whole shouting over communicating cooldowns was so important, right, in this meta. Because now, like, if this Ryan doesn't realize that they use friendly or self, right, and you have those two bubbles available, and you miss your opportunity to go in, right, basically, because then you have I thought you were falling asleep, Thorin. My bad.
I mean, it might be. He's been up for like 24 hours, but
okay.
I was probably just lagged or something when I closed my eyes.
Okay, yeah, it might have been lagging.
He's just like Reddit when they hear about your cooldown talk. They're like, Resident Sleep.
Oh yeah, I was like, oh no, this Curry guy. Okay, but no, yeah, basically, yeah, it was just the window of opportunity is gone. So like, it's all like Monty said, perspective is like everything, and to have people communicate like this and talk about every cooldown, letting everybody know, it's just so important. So yeah, like,
but it's like when the meta changes, the perspective of each hero changes at the same time.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
You can change heroes in a MOBA, and your perspective doesn't change, right?
Yeah.
So that's the big difference, is the amount of information that any player has at any given point in time changes, and that is the primary issue with shot calling in Overwatch, because you can't have a consistent amount of information from hero to hero.
Yeah, and that's why, like, in terms of shot calling, on the teams that I've been on, at least, everybody has to, like, even with New York, it's the same way. Like, everybody has to put in their own effort, right? Because, like you said, perspective is everything, and the perspective changes. So you can't expect one person to do, like, let's say, all the work in terms of calls, because they might not see everything. So yeah, like you said, this is why I feel like sometimes, if I'm working with a tier 3 team or something like this and trying to help them, kick off, and I notice just yelling and then just one person trying to do everything, micromanage, I'm like, you won't succeed like this, especially not in a game like Overwatch. So
All right, we have to before we end things, we actually do have to talk about the rest of the trades that happened because there's been a certain amount of movement, right? So I guess somewhat surprising today was Stellar randomly retiring.
Yeah, I feel like whenever you see like I said this literally before I knew the announcement was coming out, and I was talking with some of the other colleagues about it, and I was like, I'm sure we're going to get that announcement that says for personal reasons, and we'll never know what happens, and that's what he said. You can check the tweet, that Defiant made, where it's, at least it's him speaking outwardly, like on camera, saying that he is leaving for personal reasons. But I have to imagine something. Like, I'm not trying to be like a conspiracy theorist, but I have to imagine something like maybe someone in his family got sick, he has to take care of, he doesn't want to talk about it. Maybe suddenly, he has to go to the military or something. I actually don't know off the top of my head his age, because you can't really defer anymore for esports. It's like pretty impossible. And maybe something like that happened that he just doesn't want to talk about. But I find this extremely surprising, given that he was kind of a one-off in the Sombra meta in Contenders Korea. It's insane of an opportunity for how lackluster he is overall now that he's on an Overwatch League team and salaried, and he's claiming he's leaving for his own personal reasons, retiring, so he's not kicked, right? And I think that there's no conspiracy here where it's like, we're going to kick you, but please say you retired, because no one's ever going to pick you up. I don't think that's what's going on. So I think we have to kind of, I don't want to say assume, but I think we have to wonder and speculate, is something further going on, in his personal life? And I find this really sad because I think he's a player that does have a lot of potential. And I think he is a player that could be successful as a really specific, Sombra player in, maps where you want to sub a Sombra in. Even though he wasn't playing that much Sombra in stage 1, that was like the hero he was most known for in Contenders Korea. So I'm personally like shocked and sad because he's a very young player, lots of potential, has a better deal than he could ever have if he like unretires and comes back. Like he'll never have this chance again. So I'm just completely shocked by this announcement.
Yeah, also, I mean, what does this mean for Toronto? Because I think they overperformed in stage 1. And now their only other backup DPS is Asher, who is a pretty underwhelming. I was surprised they even picked him up in the first place. And so I guess there are a lot of questions as to what Asher's ability are, because he was basically on the Gladiators just a one-trick tracer that was phased out at the end of the season once the tracer meta fell off. So is this guy going to be able to play a lot of the heroes that they need him to play if Stellar has been filling the Brigida role?
I don't think, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think Asher will be able to step up, just from the things that he might have improved a lot from when he did play on Gladiators. But one thing that always is etched into my head is like when he was playing Tracer, he was okay. Like, I mean, okay, it wasn't like amazing.
Meh.
Yeah, he was like okay, whatever. Yeah, but and I remember one time he even played like McCree on Junkertown or something like this, right? And like there was just like a lot of what WTF moments basically, right? And if he's the same, if he has not improved, then I think even coaching staff and people who've played with him, maybe he's not at the level yet. But there are rumored pickups too, that could happen with to replace Stellar, but
it seems very sudden with Stellar, and the thing is about the other pickups, they require visas, and that takes time. Like, this is a massive blow to the Defiant season.
There is one rumored one. I don't think that would require a visa, but even then, it's very, we don't know like how it will do.
So you commentated Asher and Architect in Apex as well, Monty, back in the day, and Asher and Architect were both on Combox at the time, like they were teammates, and they both had like an extremely similar hero pool, an extremely similar style. And I personally wrote them both off. Like I never thought they were going anywhere. I also felt the same way about Carpe. I was completely wrong about him. But it's so crazy that Architect and Asher went in like completely different directions, and Architect became a very successful player and was very relevant. And had a larger hero pool. He really expanded. And it's like Asher somehow just never went anywhere. Like he just never really amounted to anything. And I don't know what that means, but I guess we're going to find out if he has secretly been improving, if he has made himself valuable throughout the stage where he wasn't played. But yeah, this is a huge test for Toronto Defiant. This is a huge test for Asher, who may step into that Brigida role like his former teammate Architect, now plays when they're not playing Rascal. It's been mostly Rascal recently,
Yeah.
but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's kind of interesting to like look back at where they started and where they ended up as extremely similar players from the same team.
Fair play that you actually admit it though, that you were just like the guy who was like, Michael Jordan. This guy's never going to go anywhere. He'll probably never make it. Cut him from the team. Like,
no, I mean, I really didn't. I didn't really think much of Carpe, to be honest.
He wasn't that great in the
wrong.
first season. That whatever.
He's a beast, definitely.
All right, Babybay to Atlanta Reign.
Well, we'll get to see Babybay play Overwatch. There we go.
Yeah.
So there's the news, right?
So we were actually talking today, which I thought was very interesting because we were at a meeting and a lot of people said that fans had a negative image of Babybay as like a person. And some people were like, "Oh yeah, I totally understand. You know, Babybay doesn't seem like, he seems like he'd be hard to get along with." And in reality, Babybay is incredibly nice.
He's pretty cool.
And he's also just, whenever I've ever talked to him, he's always just extremely supportive of his teammates, and like he's a team first player, and he always says that, and I've never seen him behave to the contrary. So I just thought it was really weird that apparently some people have this perception.
He's too fit. He's too handsome.
He's too good
like, I don't know. He must be a Tanner. He must be a Chad.
Wait,
nice guy.
I can ring in on this a bit just because I know like maybe I've seen him in real life, I've met him in real life, and he's a really nice guy too. But then if you get in a solo queue game with him, people I guess sometimes confuse passion with toxicity. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So,
I have that problem constantly, Curryshot. I have that problem constantly. Maybe that's why I identify with Babybay. Anyway, continue.
There we go. Yeah. So it's more so that everybody wants to win, and then you get into a solo queue game, and then stuff goes wrong. Yeah. But it's really hard to judge somebody just based off of that. So
yeah, and also just in his team environment, like he is just so supportive of his teammates from everything I've seen, and like his teammates are constantly like very pleased to be around him. I don't know, it was weird. Anyway, it's neither here nor there. That's an aside. Yeah,
sure.
Babybay is an extremely skilled mechanical player. At the end of the day, like Babybay is fucking sick in aim. So like his ceiling is potentially very high.
Yeah, I remember
at the
watching
beginning of Overwatch Season 1, he was doing some good
shit. Like he was absolutely smashing on Genji, for example. He had some great moments. I think the safe and like smart take on Babybay to Atlanta right now is like, let's wait and see, because he hasn't played in so long.
Yeah, we don't know.
And all the stuff that he did successfully at the beginning of the 2018 season is like no longer relevant now. So if anyone says like, I think he's going to suck, it's like, well, that's not really correct. Or if someone's like, he's going to kill it, I'm like, well, I mean, is he though? Like,
yeah, we just don't know.
It's also the thing about Babybay. If I look at him and his career, he started last season and he didn't have very good in-game decision making. And when you look at him on McCree and you look at him on Widowmaker, he's a long-range hit scan specialist. At least he was at the time. I actually have no idea what his hero pool is right now because he hasn't played in so long. And his primary issue was that his decision making wasn't very good. And so when I talked to Babybay with some frequency, and when Architect joined the team, Babybay himself would tell me that he thinks Architect is a very smart player and he's learned a lot from Architect. And he told me that when Krusty joined the San Francisco Shock, that he was really happy to have Krusty as coach. He felt like he was learning a lot. And by the end of the season, he did play some maps for the Shock, and he played very well, especially on McCree again. And he looked like he had learned a lot. And now but the thing about Babybay is we've seen so little of him since he had another a hit scan player like Architect, a Widow player on his team, who I think who was, at least at the time, a better decision maker. Then Krusty joins, and he tells me how much he's learning from Krusty. And then we've got this stage where there was no hit scan, yet he is still in the team environment. And I've been at their house, and he's been there very active in terms of watching and talking about scrims. And so what's going to be very interesting to me is if Babybay gets into another hit scan meta, I want to know if his decision making is going to be better, because he's effectively just been learning this entire time, right? And there are a lot of reasons not to put him in GOATS compositions when you have, players who are better at these heroes on your team, right? If you have Sinatra, who also is a mechanical freak, like you're not going to put Babybay into that role.
Yeah, I mean,
what else? So the problem for the Shock, I think, was okay, we need a great mechanical player to output damage. Well, we already have Sinatra, and Sinatra historically has been a Zarya player, whereas Babybay would have to learn it. So obviously, you're going to put Sinatra in there. What is Babybay's weakness? His decision making. Are you going to put a player that doesn't have the best decision making onto Brigida? No, you have Architect, or Rascal later on for that. So I think Babybay this year got sort of shoved into this weird place where we just couldn't see what was going on, and now Wolf is gone.
Wolf died.
And
He's back. He's back.
Sorry.
Welcome back.
So anyway, these are the kind of things that I'm very curious to see about Babybay's development, because in my conversations with him, he seems to have, he expresses that he's learned a lot, and I think if we can get into a meta that suits him, it will be interesting to see how he does.
It's crazy because it's almost like he's, when you go to some government office and you're trying to get like some form filled out, or you're trying to get like your driver's license, it's like he's always got like everything except the one form he's missing. He's like, I brought this, and they're like, sorry, you're actually going to need this. You're going to need a little bit more decision making in old economy. And he's like, all right, I'll come back, I'll bring that. And he brings it in, they're like, oh, we've changed our policy, and you're going to need something else. Like, yeah, he's always like one piece away from being able to play in the meta. It's like, oh yeah, well, now you brought your decision making, but it's a hit scan meta again, and we've got this new guy. And
well, what I think is so interesting though too is that Sinatra is arguably the best Zarya player in the league. That's an argument you can make legitimately. But the thing is if Babybay is 5% worse than Sinatra at Zarya, then he wouldn't play on the Shock, right? But for all we know, he's a better Zarya than Defran is. So I don't know the answer to these questions. I'm actually really fascinated by this trade, just because I think Babybay has so much raw skill.
Yeah, we also have to consider we don't know how long he's been out of scrims too. So it might be one of those situations where he might not do that well at the start, but maybe later on, with more experience again, he does better. But like you said, he was more involved in learning. But the application also is really important.
Sure,
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's really, I think it's a very cool trade. I also just think from a branding perspective, it's fucking amazing for Atlanta. I think Babybay is like, he's a perfect poster boy for that team.
Okay,
that's true.
Should we do the Dallas Fuel Boston trade of RCK for Note?
Sure.
Ooh.
It's
who wins this deal for a start off?
I think it's good for both teams.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird. I don't know. Does RCK in terms of what he's known for is, I think at the very end, Sombra, right? Like you think about Sombra when you think about RCK, you think about Boston missing the strong Sombra player that Note just never really played. So I don't know if he played Sombra at all for Boston, but then you have the opposite problem for the Fuel is we have Mickey, but Mickey's been underperforming for a really long time. So you have this famous diva player, but you don't have a super solid diva player in terms of RCK. It's not playing all the time, but is playing very often. So it's both teams filled one hole but gained another in another way. We're seeing that now Boston has a stronger Sombra player who can play an okay diva, and now you're seeing Fuel has a stronger diva player, but they lost their Sombra card, right? So it's a really weird thing where both teams are trying to fill holes, but they've created a new one at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think instead of saying for the organizations, I think also for Note, I think it does help them a lot, right? Since you have a primarily English speaking roster. I know they have OG, they have Effect and stuff like that too, but they're pretty fluent, and it's better for him individually too. So I think maybe he can shine more with the Fuel.
Yeah, I also, when I look at this trade, so like you're saying, RCK became better known for his Sombra, and I think there are still question marks around how flexible or skilled Boston's DPS core is. So why I think this is better for both teams is that maybe Boston takes a hit because RCK isn't going to be the diva player that we see in Note. But RCK is a more versatile player from what we've seen the Note is, so that he is going to be able to maybe plug some of those DPS holes by playing the Sombra. And if you're on Dallas, AKM is already a fantastic Sombra, so you don't have to be so concerned.
Sure, and
about
I was kind of forgetting about
that.
ACAM a little bit there.
Because like I actually think that because they have a deep DPS bench, they have 4 DPS players currently and can still switch them out. Like we could see Effect and Taimu come back in. Zachary has a pretty good hero pool, and AKM has proven very good on the Zarya and very good on the Sombra. So like, I think maybe what happens is by upgrading their diva position and sort of cementing the diva role, that they can be more flexible with their DPS players. And Boston, on the other hand, needs that flexibility in the hero pool on the actual like flex tank role. So I actually think this could be good for both teams. It fills in sort of each of their weaknesses in an interesting way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of, I definitely brushed off the ACAM Sombra. I feel like his ACAM Sombra is not as good as RCK is, but it's still
I mean, I think it's better, but also Zachary can also play Sombra. So they have multiple players already that can play Sombra, so I think trading it for the diva is good. Wolf, he's choking like NYXL right now. All right.
True.
We're close to the end anyway, right?
Yeah. What other trades do we have to talk about here?
Is there any other good ones?
I think those were the major ones. Like we already talked about Arc last week. I mean, there are some like sort of weird ones, like FRD, who is a challenger flex tank player, which I don't really understand why they got when Dako is super good. But I'm not very knowledgeable.
Might be a Kusta situation. His brain's too big. You don't know. Like maybe
Dako's brain's too big to be on Atlanta.
I mean, I think Dako, by the way, is solid. Like he's damn good. So yeah, that also was very confusing to me. But there's definitely something more to that. Like anybody can know that. Like there's definitely more to that.
What about the angle on Defran stepping back from being a pro player?
I mean, being somebody who streamed full time before as well, there's definitely more money on that side of things. But as well, there's still stress, but it's very different. You know what I mean? And I have to give a lot of props to the friend to actually, he came in for the stage and he played his stage and he did pretty well. So he has a lot to be proud of too. But I definitely think there's more benefits to streaming, in my opinion, than there is to right now to competitive. And it was like that in League of Legends too.
I think also though, like there's some people who really want to win and they're driven to win, and that means like changing your entire life. And pro gamers are often almost like Jedi, and that they're like not allowed to love. That it's hard to have a relationship. Sure. You don't live a normal life. You live in a house with a bunch of other pro gamers, sometimes in like bunk beds. Depending on what level of esports we're talking about here.
Fissure's definitely Sith, but I like the analogy. Keep going.
So you have this extreme lifestyle, and it's just not for everyone. It's just not. Like I look at XQC's scenario as well. He really struggled. Like it's just not for everyone. And he, despite this, finished the stage as was mentioned very well, played very well, had one of our most probably most remembered Zarya plays of all time.
I'm gonna calm you guys down on this one. He was a middle of the road Zarya. Okay.
Yeah, but I'm
not trying to say he was one of the best Zarya plays. I was just saying he has one of the most memorable Zarya plays.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we'll ever have of the grab off the roof, right? And that's a play a streamer would make. Like that's what's so great about it, right? Like that's somebody
the
in their six stack, yeah. So he got to show his personality and win with it. I'm not trying to say he's like one of the best players in the league by any means.
And also now when he actually like throws games by playing Torb, he can just claim like, no, I was doing that in pro play and everything. It's legit. Yes, I'm not trolling now. This is real.
Yeah, Wolf, I'm okay. I really think I'm like the opposite too, because like, man, it was nice streaming, and like I remember I talked to my brother and he's like, dude, you should probably stream or whatever, right? But I always have that competitive itch and I always go back the other way, you know what I mean? But yeah, definitely the friend's decision was better in terms of intellectually, I think.
Well, right. And it does seem to like, who are we to say anything about, if he's going to be happier doing that? I think I agree with you. He's going to make more money doing that. He's going to make a lot of money doing that. I think that probably if he was one of the best players in this league, he could make comparable money, but he's just not at that level. And if that's what's going to make him happy and this is too stressful for him, then, good for him. Like he's deserves to do what makes him happy, and he's going to be successful at it. And he's going to make a bunch of money. So good on him. He came in, he gave it a shot. I still think he's a mechanically brilliant player that I would have loved to see play longer, but we can't do that. And I think he made the right call for him, and you can't disrespect that.
You could tell he was having struggles the whole time, and he's still made it work, at least for a stage. And that's pretty respectable, I think.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
On that note, I'll now go into the dream world, where perhaps my real life actually takes place. Perhaps this was the dream. And we'll never know until I die, which might also happen.
We're stopping right now.